Hey folks, I just wanted to make a short video going over the balance manifesto that came out today. I'm just going to be talking mostly about things that affect the builds I actually play, so pretty much just like totem builds. But I'll probably talk a little bit about stuff I just find interesting here. If you just want the TLDR though, not much is changing. Like if you're playing my Freezing Pulse build or even my Holy Flame Totem build, not much in this balance manifesto affects anything. It's pretty much aimed at, well, everything but us, really, somehow. But we'll go over this step by step. I'm not going to touch on some of this like minion stuff and traps and mines. I don't care that much. So there's so many people making content for this game. I'm sure there are people who pour over every word of this stuff, but I kind of just want to hit the tickets I actually care about. So the first thing here about global gem levels is actually relevant to us a little bit, right? So what they're doing is basically one-handed and two-handed weapons are now going to be able to roll +1 to all types of spell gems. So fire, cold, lightning, physical, or chaos. And it says scepters will not have the chaos spell gem mod available. And that's actually a little bit relevant to us in the sense that we don't care about chaos spell skill gems. So it might be better to actually craft on a scepter base where we take that mod out of the pool anyway. It's just a small like footnote though. It sounds powerful, the ability to get +1 or even +2 on a staff to Freezing Pulse. Stabs are pretty much out of the question, right? Because the shield slot's really important to us, whether that's at Ziri's Reflection or a +1 Shaper Totem Shield. We can't really give that up and have just +1 or +2 skills make up for that usually. But it is going to be relevant in the sense that obviously we use a one-handed weapon and we can get +1 to cold gems on it. However, it sort of isn't much of a big deal in the grand scheme of things, right? Because if you think about like our current example weapon here that I have in the Path of Building, is something like this. Now, this new affix is either a prefix or a suffix. Let's say it's a prefix. Well, if it's a prefix, that means one of our existing prefixes has to get out of the way. But more importantly, it means how we roll the base of the scepter is different, right? Because gain up to 20% of elemental damage as extra chaos is also a prefix. So if this new slot is a prefix too, what it ultimately means is that it'll be easier to make a one-hander to multi-mod off of because you'll have a couple options. You won't just be stuck trying to get this elemental damage as extra chaos. Because what you could do, like if we pretended we were going to make this scepter and, where is it? Right here. And let's say instead of rolling this, we landed +1 to all cold gems, this new affix. So we're currently at 508,000, right? Well, if we pretend that we get this +1 from the scepter, we're at 505. So it's almost exactly the same if I have to give up my base prefix before multi-mod. Now, if it is a suffix, it's a little bit different, right? Let's put this back on here. We'll go back and lower this back down. And we would only, by the way, this would only affect Freezing Pulse. They mentioned this right here where it says these new modifiers don't apply to support gems. So in our case, it's only going to apply to like Freezing Pulse. It would technically apply to Cold Snap and Frost Bomb, but we don't give a shit about the levels of those gems. Increasing the level won't do anything. It would actually make it, slightly less convenient for cast when damage taken, I guess. But if it is a suffix, then it's a little bit different because we could give up our global crit strike multi for this new affix, which I think winds up being a slight. I'm going to do this editing so I can put it back easily. Like this knocks us down to like 477. And this is 514. So it would be like a slight improvement if we got both elemental damage, extra chaos, and +1 cold, and just gave up crit multi on our multi mod. But you have to remember that you're rolling the scepter from the base. And so if you're gonna make it way much harder, it's so much harder to get 2 shaped mods that are ideal, because you're gonna have, you know, fire, lightning, cold, physical. None of those would work for us. And just imagine trying to alt spam elemental damage, extra chaos, and +1 cold. It's gonna suck. And if you look at the difference, you're gonna do all that work and invest all that currency for like 2.5% damage or something like that. No, let's not, right? So ultimately, this thing winds up not being a big difference. What it does mean, though, the real like practical value of this change is that it's actually just going to be sort of easier to roll a scepter that is about this good, because we could get elemental damage, extra chaos, or we can get +1 cold gems off our base. Or if it's a suffix, it's a little bit different. We wind up giving up, like, we could take the +1 in the base as just a suffix, and then take out cold damage to spells or something. Ultimately, it really doesn't do much. It sounded cool, but for us, it's not going to do anything. This is really going to help minion builds a lot more than us. And there's probably going to be some other self-cast builds and shit. For my part, this was just kind of like a whatever. Traps and mines, I don't think there's a lot to talk about here. They've already gone over all the trap and mine stuff. There's a bunch of new traps. They reserve mana. They have auras around the mine now. I'm getting text messages while I record a video. The one thing I'll say about traps and mines, and this was true before this patch, and it's going to be certainly more true after, is that there is merit when you're playing you know, one of these totem builds to running a trap or mine setup, because particularly with traps as it is right now, there's something called charge trap support, and they talk about this right here. I think they said they're buffing that. And the reason you would do this isn't for damage specifically from the mines and traps, because you can actually do damage with traps and mines even as an Ancestral Bond character. Just like totems, mines and traps don't count as you. So Ancestral Bond doesn't block you from doing damage with traps. It's still not going to do jack shit for damage on its own. But what charge traps does is it means you can throw traps, and when they go off, they have a chance to grant you frenzy charges, which is not something I currently generate. So there is totally a reason to put a trap link in your build, in terms of like min-max DPS. The thing is, the way the sockets work out, you would wind up having to take out this Cold Snap, Cast when Damage Taken, Bone Chill setup, and move it into this charge trap setup. The more important thing, and the reason why I don't do it, is because it makes the build a lot more finicky, right? You're constantly chucking out traps to keep your frenzy charges up on top of your frost bomb and your self-cast curse and your replacing of totems. And it's like, it's just like one thing too many for me. I think it's too annoying. When this patch comes out, there's going to be merit to doing something like having mines that you throw out just for the aura, right? These new mines have like damage increasing auras before they go off, which will totally also be a thing that you can consider in one of these builds. I'm probably not going to do it. I'll probably add a little bit of talk about it in the guides, but it is a thing, and it is an option. It's always been an option for getting frenzy charges in particular. But that's pretty much the only thing relevant to totem builds as far as traps goes. The damage over time stuff, the short version of all this shit is basically Poison got buffed in 2 ways, right? They're making, first off, they're making the chaos damage over time multiplier affect Poison. It previously didn't. They like the affix has this huge long name of like non-ailment chaos damage over time multiplier. It's stupid, and so they just clipped the non-ailment part, and so now it also works for Poison. So there's a lot more sources of poison damage basically to enjoy. And then they also made Perfect Agony even stronger by making all your crit multi apply to damage over time multi, basically, at like half value, as it says. So yeah, this makes sense. This is Poison themed league along with Necromancer and Charge mines and traps. So there's just going to be a lot more sources of poison damage. And they're also extending this concept to basically all the other dots, right? Fire damage over time multiplier, ignite damage over time multiplier. And I think there's a bleeding mentioned somewhere in here. Yeah, poison damage or bleeding damage. So basically, all the sources of damage over time are getting some more multiplier affixes. I don't really like those builds, but I'm sure some people watching the channel do. Minions, this one is I'm not even going to talk about all this shit, but the only thing you need to know for the most part is that like all minions got their just buffed like crazy. That's basically the short of it. Like, minions are going to be really strong this league, and if you don't like my totem builds, I would say consider a minion build, with the caveat that minion gear is going to be expensive as fuck this league, is what I'm guessing. Because this here is probably going to be, maybe not, you know, quote-unquote meta in terms of what's actually the most powerful build in the game at the moment, but I think it's certainly going to be the most popular. People fucking love minions for some reason, right? The Necro in D2 was super popular, even though he was actually like a garbage class. You know, the hardcore D2 players knew that he was the weakest class, and the speedrunners talk about it all the time. It's like really bad to speedrun on the Necro, but people just love it. You know, they love raising a big army of bullshit and running around and watching them kill stuff. And that's going to be way stronger now. Just full stop. The Necromancer got really buffed. The minion gems themselves get really buffed. So this is going to be a really strong league start, by the way. Minions are always kind of that, but now it's just going to be crazy. There's so much power baked into the gems that even before you convert a witch into a Necromancer, you're going to crush stuff. So this is also a really good league start if you're not wanting to play totems. This here is a big change. This mana for spellcasters thing. The short version of this is that there's now absolutely no way to leech mana from anything but attacks. Before, in 3.7, they basically removed Warlord's Mark from spellcasters. Now there's just no way. They've just removed all the remaining sources, and they're basically saying you need, as a spellcaster, to invest in mana the way melee and attack characters invest into accuracy, right? So, the way things are right now, this is definitely not equal, right? It's going to take more investment into mana to make spellcasting sustainable through pure regen, compared to like how much investment a melee or an attack character has to do into accuracy right now, which is especially true after this 3.7 accuracy calculation changed. It was way easier for them to hit accuracy cap. It's going to be much harder, I think, for a spellcaster to invest into mana and sustain themselves just through investment in the passive tree. But they are also changing mana flasks, which is usually the kind of thing that players roll their eyes at because nobody wants to run a mana flask. Like, you're giving up, you know, it could be a Wise Oak, could be an Atzeres, whatever the fuck that purple flask is. I can never remember the name of that thing. Basically, you're giving up some kind of damage flask or some kind of utility flask or mana flask, and nobody likes doing it. But they are making what's probably the most important change for mana flask that they could have made, is that there's a new affix that allows mana flask to continue to run even if you hit your maximum mana. It's going to cost you duration, but that's still really important, because what it means is that mana flask will now be, there's going to be a way to run a mana flask on somebody who has like 80% mana reserved, right? That's really the big issue with mana flask, is that if I've got only like 15% of my mana pool and the other 85% is caught up in auras and shit, mana flasks don't do anything. Because if I hit my mana flask, it only takes like half a second to fill that little tiny sliver up, and then the mana flask would shut off. But that is only worth like a few attacks, right? Or a few spell casts in this case. Now you're going to have at least an option to run a mana flask and get full value out of the whole duration. I don't know. I think that is only going to do a few things, right? It's going to open up some people to be running Mind Over Matter in a few more cases that they might not have been. But it is, like I said, it's going to open up people who are struggling to balance that like reserved mana versus active mana ratio. It also sounds like this reduced mana support, I don't know how much I buy into this thing. It's basically a support gem that is trying to push you to reduce your mana costs, because basically like you cast more and you get these charges that buff up your shit, but if you spend too much mana on the linked skill, it takes the charges away. So the idea is you want to fit as many casts as you can before you hit that mana cap. And there are ways to reduce mana costs pretty far. Obviously the Hierophant has a really important and juicy node in that context, and this Sanctuary of Thought node feels like this gem was designed around a concept sort of like this, where you have like this giant mana cost reduction and you just enjoy this inspiration buff the whole time. So I think they're trying to give more ways to interact with mana scaling, right? And ways to fuck with mana and turn it into other benefits. Clarity also got a buff. And they've also, this is really interesting, the variety of new passive trees have been added, including one that improves mana on Arcane Surge, which I'll talk about in a minute, and one that gives curse bonuses, a way to recover mana after hitting or killing cursed enemies. I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like fucking Warlords, Mark. That's a weird thing to me for them to add back after they took a curse that did that shit out of the game. I don't know. I thought that was super odd. And then it says one that grants spell damage based on your maximum mana. Now, when I read that, I was like, I know a guy that has a lot of fucking mana. It's me. So I'm pretty interested in this as soon as I read that. We're going to talk more about this in a minute. As far as melee, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't give a shit about melee. I just don't. I've never liked it. I didn't like it in 3.7. I didn't care about it. I still don't. As far as I can tell, what happened, impossibly, was that they nerfed Cyclone, which is not impossible, but then they also nerfed everything else. They basically buffed strikes, I'll say that. They definitely buffed strike skills. And they buffed Ancestral Call a little bit. They basically didn't do much of anything, the multi-strike. They certainly did not change multi-strike in the way that everybody was complaining about it. They nerfed Retaliation because it was fucked up with Face Breakers. And then they nerfed Pulverize support, which I was really surprised to see. Of all these changes in melee that all seem, you know, either reasonable or irrelevant to me, like Cyclone getting nerfed, of course that was going to happen. Pulverize is a gem that was enabling something that I felt was really specific, which was this Pulverize gem. Basically what it does is it used to give a more area of effect in exchange for attack speed. And attack speed is typically hella important for melee in particular. So this was actually a gem that was sort of enabling stuff like Earthquake, or like, what is that? Ice Slam? What the fuck is that skill called? Ice Crash? Stuff that just basically swings slow and did these giant, big old hits. So there was like a way to make those skills useful again. And they kind of like nerfed the whole point of it, where they basically changed the more area into increased area, so it just stacks with the increased area you currently have, and then they gave it a more multiplier, so it's like some more area and then more damage in exchange for attack speed, which is less damage. And when I heard that, I just thought nobody was fucking playing Ice Crash or Earth, like nobody was touching those. And so when you read a nerf to Cyclone, you would think, maybe this is what is going to enable people to go out and discover things like Earthquake and Ice Crash, which were actually pretty decent. They weren't terrible. You could make Ice Crash hit basically the whole fucking screen. But not anymore. So like by the time you turned your eyes to these skills that you weren't using, they got nerfed before you even got to them. So I don't know. For me, this line, this Pulverized support thing, it seems fucked up to me. This is not the time to do this. I don't know if there is a time to do this, but it seems like a bad idea. I feel a little bit bad for melee in that sense, but you know, whatever, fuck melee. I don't play melee. Tornado Shot got nerfed, which seems like a miracle, as this skill has been overpowered forever, but they decided to nerf it now. Although maybe it'll slightly get buffed in the context of, there seemed to be some kind of problem where Chain would like 2 chaining projectiles could choose the same target, and if that happened, only one projectile could deal damage, the other one just kind of like disappeared into the ether. And now it seems like there's rules now where it'll prevent 2 projectiles, so all your projectiles will try to find a valid target. So maybe it won't hurt that bad because you're going to get more value out of chaining. I mean, it's Tornado Shot. You could take the entire helm enchant fucking away, I think, and it'd still be like a pretty ridiculous skill. They also are buffing Lightning Arrow and Ice Shot, I guess. And apparently Split Arrow. Not much to say here other than Tornado Shot, you know, got nerfed. There's a big shock. Isn't it like a Contagion nerf, which I don't think is too surprising. It doesn't sound like a huge nerf. It says Contagion no longer gains radius as a gem level, which I think takes the skill from like 24 to 20 radius out of the gem. So you probably lose like twice that difference when you were like fully stocked, you know? You'd probably go from like 48 to 40, something like that, in terms of, I just don't think it matters. I think this is probably totally whatever. This body swap change is probably going to enable some fucking really meme builds. There's a Poet's Pen change down at the bottom where it kind of makes me raise an eyebrow in regards to this. And there's going to be some like really fucking dumb body swap totem shit where it's just memes. But I don't know. Maybe there's a real build behind that, but it's whatever. Passive tree changes. They're talking about, I don't know if you saw these, if you're paying attention, there was some leaks. Somebody leaked the passive tree from the alpha tester build. They talked a little bit about this in the Bay class, where basically somebody who was banned but previously had access to the alpha server was able to patch their client, and then they were also able to log into the forums, and that enabled them to see some alpha testing shit. And he basically leaked the entire tree as much as he could find. So most of this stuff is sort of common knowledge, or at least it's known. They basically reworked the mine nodes, and of course, because they're making a lot of changes. There's a lot of poison node changes, the damage over time. We talked about that. This one seemed a little bit odd to me. It says they split the Flask Effect cluster. What they're talking about is the Alchemist node, which is right here. I actually have this in my level 100 build, which is the main thing you take this for is basically Flask Effect. Not the duration, but the effect of flasks on you, right? So basically your flasks are actually 10% stronger. What they said though is they basically split this wheel into 4 different wheels. So there's now like 4 wheels somewhere that have Flask Effect in them. But they're moving them towards the Ranger, basically because, you know, Ranger has like an entire Flask ascendancy. The thing is, the only like real change to flasks in this patch is with mana flasks. So in a league where they're trying to push mana flask usage, they took this one Flask Effect node that affected mana, and they're all over here now. I thought that was a little bit odd. I probably would have put them here, right? It's already kind of here. I would have left them here. From here to here, maybe. But this is like shadow shit. Ranger's down here. It's actually going to be down here, probably. Where, like, sort of like where Herbalism is. I don't know. It just seemed odd to me that, like, in a league where mana flasks are the only flasks that are getting significant changes, you basically can't access those nodes as a Templar anymore, and you probably won't even get them as a Witch. Kind of shitty. But, I don't know. I don't know what the logic is there, other than the fact that, yeah, Ranger has Pathfinder. Not that Pathfinder needed any buffs. They said they raised the radius of all aura skills, basically, and they lowered the bonus from increased area of effect of aura skills because of mines. Because mines technically have aura tags, they were going to get radius, basically, from that stat. It's not a minor change. It's not a major change, and it doesn't affect us at all. There's a new power charge cluster somewhere. We don't really care. I think investing into power charges in general is just kind of shit in this game right now. It's not even as good as investing into like power charges usually. So I don't think this really matters too much. And then they said they moved, there are some wheels that grant like larger plus attributes that they added last patch, and they're moving them just to move them away from sockets, basically. Because there was some jewel shit that was interacting with those. This here part has some relevance to us because there is a change to the Hierophant. And it says the mana path has changed as a result of a review of all mana mechanics, right? They've already talked about, they changed mana nodes in the tree, and they changed mana flasks. And so they reviewed this mana path, which is this path right here. We get the Divine Guidance one in both my totem builds, and then we skip this Sanctuary of Thought node, but this is the line they're talking about. And what they said is it should be more offensively powerful for a character with a heavy mana investment now, with its defensive power slightly reduced. And when I read that, I was worried that they were going to take the Mind Over Matter aspect out of Divine Guidance, try and insert more damage. Well, thanks to the leaks, we can actually see what they're going to be doing. And these leaks, by the way, have proven to basically be 100% accurate. Like when they did, the leaks came out before they did like the Assassin and the Raider changes and stuff, and they were all accurate. And the Necro changes even. So I'm pretty confident this is what's going to ship. And we're going to see tomorrow, right? The patch notes are tomorrow. It's not a big wait. Divine Guidance is the one we're most concerned about, right? Because currently, if we take a look, it is two things. It's 150% or 150 flat mana, and then 10% more effectiveness to our Mind Over Matter. So 10% more damage taken from mana. Now is three things. It's 30% increased maximum mana instead of 150 flat. It's still, we still keep the 10% Mind Over Matter bonus, but then we also get this increases and reductions to maximum mana also applied to damage at 30% of their value, which I don't run across many builds that invest into mana as much as mine. We have a lot of mana. We have 168 just coming from the tree. I've got almost 3.3 thousand in this setup that I have in my default path of building. And what we can do is we can actually just simulate what this node's going to do for us right away. So here's what's changing. We're getting 30% increased max mana instead of flat, and then this thing. We can easily simulate both of these. So right now we've got 3,282 mana and 508,000 DPS in this setup. So let's take this node out. What we'll do is we'll just pretend, we'll use the Soul Mantle here. We're going to add 30% increased maximum mana to this item. Oh, did I screw something up? It did. There's no plus sign on this stat. Okay, so we're going to lose, as you can see, we go down to 3,177 mana. We lose about 100 mana just in this setup. And the rate, like the actual amount you're going to lose from that change from 150 flat into 30% increase is going to depend on how much flat mana you have on gear, right? The less flat mana you have on gear, the slightly more you're going to lose from losing more flat mana. Does that make sense? But that's not the only thing that changes, right? We want to get that damage. We want to simulate that 30% increased damage. But we know that we currently have 168% coming from the tree, and we just added 30. I've actually got a little bit more. We're just gonna call it 200% increased mana. And this is a really simple thing to just times 0.3. So we're going to get 60% increased damage, which is pretty good, right? Like if you look at Clear Mind goes up to 60%. If I took this out, I lose a decent chunk of damage here. You can see that this thing is worth about 6.5% damage. Boop. And we can add that onto Soul Mantle. And this is an actual stat, right? It's going to be adding this exact stat, 60% increased damage to the character, and we'll go up to 546. So again, it's worth about 6.5% damage. 6.5 to 7. And this is damage that we're only paying 100 mana for. It's basically getting a second Clear Mind minus the mana regen for free. That's awesome. I have no complaints about this, basically. And while we're on the subject of leaks, there are a couple other leaked nodes that I want to talk about, because as they mentioned in the Balance Manifesto, in this Mana for Spellcasters thing, passives that affect mana flasks have been added, blah 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 blah. There was the talk about this one here, though, including one that improves. It says a variety of new tree clusters have been added. I think they talked about changing existing ones somewhere, but the point is this one here is actually in the leaks here. It's called Arcane Capacitor. and it's a 4-point wheel, which you can come from either side. And it's a little bit hard to tell, but I recognize this right away. Because you can see this power charge, there's only a few power charges in the tree, and this one has an armor miner, which means it is actually right here. It's going to be right above this overcharge node, which obviously we go right by. We're going to be already connected to this new node. And it is 15% increased maximum mana on the notable, which is slightly less than you would get from a typical mana notable, but it's only a 3-point. So there's almost no way this node doesn't wind up in my build, because not only is it increased mana though, it gives 10% increased effective Arcane Surge on you per 200 mana spent recently, up to 50%. Now the 10% chance to gain Arcane Surge when you kill an enemy is not going to work for us. It doesn't do anything because we're not killing things. Our totems are. So unfortunately that goes out the window. But the 10% increased effective Arcane Surge on you per 200 mana spent recently is great, because our totems are expensive as fuck. Our totems cost 130 to drop once. And if we look at our Frostbite, that's 138 to cast once. So dropping a totem and casting a curse once is going to increase the effective Arcane Surge by 10%. 10% is not a huge amount, for the record. But just getting free damage out of this mana node, on top of the fact that we're going to be converting mana into damage on a small scale, means this 3-point node is almost certain to wind up in the modified build. The other notable we're talking about is this Crusader node. This is clearly a hidden node, and if you look at the position of this, you can see that this hidden node is pretty much meant for Templars, and especially Hierophants, right? If we go to the tree, it's going to appear right here, right next to our Hierophant boy here. And this is one of those hidden notables that you can get through anointing. You'll combine 3 oils. Basically, this notable you can only get through the anointment system. This is not in the skill tree. And what it's going to do is 8% increase max mana, but it's also got that same increases and reductions to maximum mana also apply to damage at 30% of their value. Now, to be clear, there's no added benefit of stacking this with our Hierophant node, right? It's not like that affix is suddenly better because we already have a source of it. It doesn't scale in that way. But it is going to grant the same amount of damage as the node that we already are getting from our Hierophant. And we already know that it's worth about 60%, at least in my build. This has 8% increased max mana on it, so it'll actually wind up being something like 62% increased damage. But that's also going to improve the value of the one we get from our Hierophant. Now, 62% damage, because we simulated that already, right? We know that that is worth about 6.5%-ish, thereabouts. But you can compare that really easily to the value of other stuff. So we're at 546,000 DPS per totem, assuming we have the new Hierophant node in 3.8, right? So like, if we change this to 120, so let's say we took the Crusader notable on top of that. Now we're at 584. But we have multiple choices for what we do with this anointment notable. And we know that there are some really good choices, right? We have things like Throatseeker for 30% crit multi, things like Heart of Ice that give 25% cold damage and 6% pen. We have notables like Disciple to Slaughter. This one is pretty interesting. Gives you +1 min frenzy charges and a chance to generate frenzies on kill, which I would like a lot more than trying to throw traps to generate frenzies. So there's competition, and we know roughly, what this would give in comparison. Because if we change this back to 60, and let's say not 600, and let's say that we took plus 30% to global critical strike multiplier. We'll say that we pretended that we took Throatseeker instead of this Crusader notable. See how we lose a tiny bit of damage. So what that means is that this new anointed notable, this Crusader node, is slightly better than any of the raw DPS options that we're going to have for my build. So it's slightly better than getting Throatseeker, and it's going to be even a little bit more improved over Heart of Ice. So that makes this basically like they succeeded. If you invest a lot into mana, this stat's actually pretty good. Because 30% crit multi is a fucking good node. You know, it's a node. It's probably the high, like if you look at node power, it's absolutely one of the best nodes in the tree, along with Heart of Ice and Heartseeker. And this thing will be better than just slightly. This is another one of those cases where it's not like build enabling, but it is giving us another option that is competitive with our best choices in something that's probably going to be kind of hard to get, right? These anointed oils aren't going to be trivial. So this Crusader node is on the list officially. We want this. It's one of the things we might want. I will say that that is the truth in terms of raw DPS. I feel like this Flash Freeze node down here in Ranger is still probably my personal choice for an offensive node, because you're still going to get 24% cold. Obviously, that's much less than 60 or 62, but you're going to get 20% projectile speed on top of it and 10% effective chill. I really like both of those bonuses. Projectile speed in particular is really juicy. Freezing Pulse, it does more damage the closer it is, right? So the faster you can make it shoot, the more damage it does within the same amount of distance traveled. And plus it just goes farther, right? You want to be able to shoot Freezing Pulse as far as it'll go. So this, if I was going to choose an offensive node, I still feel like Flash Freeze would be the one I would want the most. And then I would probably want the new Crusader node second. And then these other options like Disciple to Slaughter, Throat Seeker, Heartseeker, Heart of Ice, in that order. But Crusader is really good. So I would take any of those options, pretty much no questions asked. And then we're going to have this new Arcane Capacitor. And this probably isn't the only change I'm going to have to account for. I think the other mana nodes are going to be changed. And mana is going to be, because of these converting max mana into damage nodes, we're going to have to think a little bit more about any kind of other mana node changes that appear in the tree. If it's just Arcane Capacitor, you know, we're going to yank a few points from somewhere. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'll probably just wait for patch notes to make any serious attempt at build adjustments. That seems like the reasonable thing to do. But I just want to talk about these leaked nodes because I was a little bit concerned when they got to this point, when I got to these Hierophant changes and they were like, we changed the mana line. Because I really thought we were going to lose the 10% Mind Over Matter. We didn't. We actually kept almost all of our mana and we got like, you know, 7-ish% more damage out of it. Cool. I was also wondering if the Sanctuary of Thought was going to be something that we consider overtaking Conviction of Power. Because that seemed like it might be a thing, but it's totally not. This is what they're talking about when they say they lowered the defensive power of this mana line a little bit, because you get less mana converted into extra maximum energy shield. But what they did is they made it grant increased area of effect for unreserved mana. Obviously, we have shitloads of unreserved mana, but guess what? Our skill is not an area skill. So we would actually get a shitload of area of effect out of this. And there's going to be totem builds that this is going to be fucking really nice for. I could definitely see doing something like Purifying Flame totems and just having like a totally disgusting level of AoE. We're not going to be taking it in Freezing Pulse. This is definitely out of the question. These other Ascendancy changes seem really minor. I think there were a couple of minor nerfs to Berserker and Slayer, which would be relevant. They nerfed Trickster's Ghost Dance a little bit, which I saw coming. The Ascendant will obviously get changes based on the other Ascendancies that are getting changed, namely Saboteur and Necromancer and shit. I think there were some Golem buffs, not just in the Elementalist, but in the skill gems themselves under minions, so maybe we'll see more Golemancers running around. In my opinion, the most interesting part of the patch notes, though, they're right here. Here and here. So they're basically making unlocking Veiled mods a little bit easier, which is something I think most people really wanted, right? Modifiers granted only by items from specific syndicate members now require half as many unveils to learn to craft, which is fucking awesome. They're also more likely to appear as one of your choices. So anything that was like specific to Haku or specific to It That Fled, they're going to drop basically more items that have those, and you only need half as many to learn the craft, which is one of the most important things about the Veiled system. Modifiers only found on less common item types or limited to only 1 or 2 is more unlikely to appear. This one here, though, is really juicy. Flask modifiers unveiled only from the unique flask from Katarina now only require a single unveil to unlock, which means you are definitely going to want to get in there and bust Katarina's ass, because you're going to get flask mods every time you run that. There's like a crit mod, I think there's an item quantity mod. Basically, this is really nice. I think I ran Katarina 3 times and I didn't unlock a single flask mod. Whereas in 3.8, I would have gotten 3 of them. So that's super good. This is a great change. This was also kind of an interesting change where they said packs of monsters that spawn with rare monsters now have a single shared modifier from the well, or from the rare, as well as more life damage, experience, and item rewards. So they're actually juicing up, like when a rare spawns, it's going to be much different than when a magic pack spawns. Because the rare is going to spawn, all the rares that come packaged with that rare are going to get one of his access, like a, you know, I don't think they're going to be able to share auras like that. But anytime they get, like, I think Volatile is a good example, right? They'll all have Volatile Flame Blood probably. Something really shitty. But it makes it more interesting to run across a rare pack than it does running across a magic pack. But they're also going to drop more loot, which is really nice. And more XP. Which is also something that's really nice, because I think there was getting to be a pretty big discrepancy with how magic monsters were actually worth more experience per like time than a rare monster. So this is a good change. And hopefully it makes killing rare monsters slightly more interesting. Monster accuracy got lowered. I guess it's a good thing for all of us, right? It'll be slightly less, slightly more tanky, I guess, versus physical hits. Reduce the chance for a league mechanic that drops a random unique to drop a league specific unique. Now, I don't know. I'm assuming that when they say league mechanic, they're only talking about the current league mechanic. I don't know if this applies to, like, if I am rolling random unique belts from Einhar, you know, from the beast crafting, does this mean I have less chance of getting a headhunter because it's a Nemesis League unique? I don't think so, but it could be, right? They'll probably clarify that at some point. I'm pretty sure it just means, though, that, like, you know, during Legion, a lot of our league-specific uniques came from just killing monoliths, because for some reason they're allowed to do that. So I'm assuming that what they're saying is that the Blight League mechanic itself will drop noticeably less league-specific uniques to other leagues. We'll have to see. They made some change to pure breachstones, basically. Or just all breachstones, where they, if you've never done a breachstone, you start from what looks like a regular breach and it like expands into basically infinity, right? It's going across the entire map. And basically they're just making it expand faster so that you can get to the end faster, even though you still have like the same amount of time to do the breach. And it looks like they're buffing the life of, so physical and chaos breaches, what they're really saying is Ul Nettle and Chayula. So they're buffing the life of those two, because it seems like when you scale them up into pure breachstone, for some reason those two had less life than like Zoth or Tool or whatever. So that's fine. Like Chayula actually had fuck all health anyway, so I don't think most people are going to notice. And then it says we made adjustments to a large variety of unique items based on their use, which is super vague. They mentioned 2 things. They mentioned Blasphemer's Grasp, and they mentioned Poet's Pen. The Poet's Pen one's going to be big, because Poet's Pen basically got thrown in the fucking garbage. And going down from 0.25 to 0.15 probably will bring Poet's Pen builds back to some extent. Like when I mentioned body swap, this is what I was thinking about. There's going to be some like corny ass Poet's Pen body swap shit. And there's going to be plenty of other corny. I think Poet's Pen is just a corny item. But it is a tier 1 unique, and so it should have like some build enabling qualities to it, instead of just being a stupid thing that people reminisce about from previous leagues. So I think that's probably a good thing. So yeah, this video is already longer than I wanted it to be. Jesus Christ. Yeah, long story short, as far as the supplies totem builds, this global gem levels thing doesn't actually matter that much, other than it'll be easier to roll a weapon. Traps and mine changes doesn't mean much of anything to us, except unless you're willing to put trap skill gems and use traps to buff your own damage. I think it's boring. It's actually just a big hassle to me, but it's definitely a thing, and we can do it. Damage over time buffs, I don't care. Minion buffs, I kind of care. I might make a minion build after I get done with my Freezing Pulse League starter. But for the most part, if you care about minions, this is the league to play minions. Even more than all of this shit above here, I'm telling you, if you care about minions, play them this league. Because I don't know if you noticed the pattern about how this game evolves over time. They're going to nerf the shit out of some of this. Don't wait until 3.9 or 4.0 to try and play minions. This will be the league where they're going to be really strong. You were warned. Mana for spellcasters, I expect a lot of gnashing of teeth over this. I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's probably better for the game in the long term. It'll probably require more changes to get balance in terms of how many points a self-caster has to invest in a mana to feel good about it. But it's better than leaving the leech mechanic on spellcasting, I think. And as far as we are concerned, it basically doesn't affect us at all, other than it might be buffing us slightly. Because there's going to be more mana nodes to invest into, and we're going to get better returns out of them, and then we're going to get even more returns in the sense that we're going to convert some of it into damage thanks to the Hierophant changes. So, you know, pat the poor self-casters on the shoulder, but just realize we're probably getting buffed out of that. Melee, whatever, fuck melee. Range, fuck tornado shot, that's pretty much all that happened. Couple meaningless changes here. Passive trees we talked about. Hello, Saboteur. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to talk about. This stuff down here is actually the important bit to me. We got some minor buffs. Freezing Pulse still seems like, not only is it sitting pretty, I think it's sitting prettier than it did in 3.7, which is like mind-blowing to me. We really got away scot-free on this one. Well, I guess we'll have to see the patch notes. Maybe they didn't talk about some edge case stuff. Maybe there's a change to Soul Mantle or Kigazaru that they didn't want to tell us about. That would bum me out. We'll find out tomorrow. I'll probably also have a video tomorrow going over patch notes. And I won't have build guides updated tomorrow. I have a lot to do tomorrow, unfortunately. I will have a video out tomorrow because I will get back in time to do that, but I definitely won't have time to look at all the changes and make build updates. That is not going to happen until either Wednesday or maybe Thursday at the latest. But they should happen both for Freezing Pulse and Holy Flame Totem before the league starts. Everything should be good to go, except for Path to Building. I can't fix that. Path to Building typically does not update until after the league starts. So any build updates are going to come packaged with links to the official skill planner, because that actually gets updated tomorrow, I think. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm still planning on starting Freezing Pulse Totems, and I think you probably should too, because it looks like we're really getting away with one here. If you don't play Totems, I'd seriously consider playing Minions, because of everything here. This is the one I think is more likely to be strong, and also most likely to get changed after this patch. Anyway, I'll catch you guys tomorrow for the patch notes. Peace.